Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hello and welcome to episode 58 of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. Our theme today will revolve around the topics of happiness and gratitude. We're going to explore how happiness and gratitude fits into our world, and more specifically, how happiness and gratitude fits into the world of sales. And we have the perfect guest for this conversation. Edwin Edebari is the Chief Happiness Officer of an organization called the Happy Neighborhood Project. And I found out about the project approximately 6 months ago and was pleasantly surprised to find that the participants in said project are business people just like you, just like me, who are looking for a friendly place to network and collaborate. And these like-minded people from all around the world have demonstrated their commitment to help each other in this quest for success. And I think you'll find my conversation with Edwin most enlightening. And I promise you, you'll be happier for listening. I believe that a state of happiness can't really be achieved unless and until you're willing and able to experience the first cousin of happiness, and I'm talking about gratitude. At the time of this recording, there are so many things about which we should be grateful. You know, we're entering the recovery phase of the pandemic, and business is beginning to show some signs of normalcy. As an effective communicator, you're going to be called on to remember that most of your prospects have been isolated from other humans for all of these months. And I'd like you to consider that your success in re-entering the world of business may indeed depend upon the attitude and mindset you portray, let alone the language you use. So, in addition to our conversation about happiness, I'm going to give you my take on gratitude, and also we'll be moving on to the next entry in the Easier Way to Sell guidelines, which is know the problem you solve. In our last episode, the guideline we addressed was be a problem solver. Being a problem solver is really the best way to approach this easier way to sell sales process. And your ability to be truly effective as a problem solver calls on your knowledge and understanding of the problem that you solve. And sadly, most business people know what they do and they know the benefits they provide, but are truly unaware or unable to communicate the problem they solve in a way where people will say, yeah, can you help me with that? And that's what we're going to cover in this segment of the episode. There's a lot that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm most excited to get your feedback. And also, by the time you've listened to this, we'll have had our first meeting of the Close the Deal Club, and I'll let you know how you can join and or attend the meeting a little later. But for right now, let's get into this episode. The Easier Way to Sell guideline we covered in the last episode was be a problem solver. And it's my coaching and my belief that when you approach the sales process as a problem solver rather than as a traditional stereotypical salesperson, you'll turn your appointments into sales more easily and more often. And why is that, you might ask? Well, because people really don't care about what you do and they don't care how you do it. All they care about is what you, your product, or your service can do for them. And when you give your spiel, and that's the technical term for your presentation, you provide information about features and benefits that you or your company think are important to share. And remember, in this system, your job is to get information, not give it. Your job is to discover and uncover whether or not the prospect with whom you're speaking has the problem you solve. And this step must take place before you give any form of presentation. If you avoid this step, it's likely your sales process will go on and then end up crashing back to earth. The cause of this unhappy ending is usually the result of giving information instead of discovering whether or not the prospect actually has a problem your offering will solve. For this process to be as effective as it can be, you must be aware of the problem you solve. Do you know the problem you solve? Most likely the answer is no. One way to measure your ability to communicate the problem you solve is the number of times you hear prospects asking you, can you help me with that? But instead of focusing on uncovering the prospect's problem, you're trying to sell this person a thing that you think they need from your point of view rather than theirs. And that leads us to the big problem with problem solving. Most salespeople are not aware of the problem they solve. You ask a salesperson, what problem do you solve? And they'll respond by telling you the solution they provide. If you ask a tax preparer what problem she solves, the response is usually, I help people get their taxes put in on time. That's not the problem this person solves. Getting taxes completed on time is the deliverable. The problem they solve is a lot of people are frustrated because they find getting their taxes done on time is difficult. The problem a window company solves is not installing new windows so you'll feel more comfortable. The problem is the frustration of the homeowner brought about by the house being either too hot or too cold. A financial services representative helps people plan for a successful retirement. But what problem does that solve? People are frustrated because they don't have a clue how to set up their retirement. Telling you to make this shift in your language is probably the most valuable tip I can provide you. In terms of communicating your business most effectively, the use of a problem statement is your best bet. Stop telling people what you do and tell them the problem you solve. This problem-based approach to clarifying your business offering will cause your telephone prospecting to be more effective. Use a problem statement instead of a standard pitch or come on, and you'll see a boost in your networking and your sales results. When you combine your understanding of the problem that you solve, as well as your ability to communicate that problem in 15 seconds or less, and when you combine that with the easier way to sell selling system, you can increase your business by 20 to 50% over the next 6 months to 1 year, guaranteed. Now, if you do nothing else after you hear this segment except sit down and finish the following sentence, you will have done yourself a great service. And here is the sentence. When I first talk to my prospects, they're frustrated because of fill in the blank, or they're frustrated by fill in the blank. Answer that question. Learn from your answer. Employ a problem statement when telling someone what you do. And this works in every industry, every business, and every profession because I know I repeat myself, but people on the other side of the communication really don't care about you or what you do or how you do it. All they care about is what you can do for them in the form of solving their problem. So, in the last episode, we discussed being a problem solver, which is helping your prospects get from where they are to where they say they want to be, and you get compensated for it. Now, I'm asking you to know the problem you solve so you can present it effectively, and have someone say to you, "That's the problem I have. Can you help me?" Ditch your pitch. Use your presentation later in the meeting to prove that you can solve the problem. Using your pitch at the beginning of an appointment is just not as effective as you were led to believe. So, ditch your pitch until it's called for and focus on the problem that you solve. Here's an example of what it sounds like when a tax preparer is asked, "So, what do you do?" Well, you know how frustrating it is, especially with all the new tax laws, to get your taxes filed correctly and on time? I take care of that for them. Is that an issue you're dealing with? Now, that's just one example. And what I invite you to do, again, strongly, is go back and finish that sentence from before. When I first talk to my prospects, they're frustrated because of, or they're frustrated by. Answer that question and learn from your answer. Know the problem you solve. If you're looking for a safe, comfortable, and affordable place to learn the easier way to sell, I invite you to join the Close the Deal Club. We just had our very first meeting of the club, and the participants all report back that they felt not only was their time spent wisely, but what they learned will help them with their business throughout the week. That's what the Close the Deal Club is. It's a place where you can come and kind of look at your week ahead and set up your strategy and learn some techniques that will help you turn your appointments into sales more easily and more often. Go to the website at closethedealwithoutselling.com and join the club. I grew up in the 1950s, but no matter when I was born, as a human, I took on my parents' worldview based on their personal realities, and I'll bet your experience was somewhat the same. Both of my folks lived through the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s, and my dad was a veteran and participated in the invasion of Europe in 1944. Before he went off to battle the Nazis, he'd been serving as a breadwinner for his family and had been doing so since he was a teenager. His three wonderful sisters, my aunts, contributed to the family also, but my dad always told me he felt responsible for the well-being of his mom and siblings. My mom was also raised in a single-parent home. During my childhood, the family environment couldn't help but be affected by all the negatives that Mom and Dad had experienced in the world during the prior 2 decades. My parents, and Mom especially, were a poster child for the half-empty glass society. I was brought up in a scarcity-based household. My mom would have us drive nearly across town in Cleveland to get gasoline that was a penny cheaper per gallon than the gas station on our own corner. I'm talking about traveling 15 miles to get gas that was 13.9 cents a gallon instead of 14.9 cents a gallon. The whole reality of the Depression had made a real impact on her when it came to money. Truly little in my life was related to scarcity, though. I had a roof over my head. I had access to a television. I had a baseball mitt. I had clothing. I had food. I even heard it said once or twice at a meal that I should always clean my plate because there were poor people starving all around the world. I never really heard much conversation about the good things in their life. Until I was in my mid-30s, I lived the lesson of expect the best and plan for the worst, with the expect the best part being that portion of the equation written in teeny tiny letters. It turns out that this mindset was catchy. I absorbed it because we take on the beliefs and attitudes that surround us. I really had so much to be grateful for. However, unless the concept of gratitude is reinforced in your daily life, it becomes easy to see mostly those things which affect you in a negative way. And remember, just because you believe something is true, that doesn't make it true. It just makes it true for you. Here's an example that I just went through. I have a motor scooter, and I inadvertently left the key in the on position and drained my battery. It would have been easy to go negative and stay negative, no pun intended, except for the fact that I had a battery charger close at hand, for which I was grateful. In your day-to-day business activities, there are probably more things to be grateful for than you might recognize at first. I realize you have enough to do and concern yourself about now. However, I suggest that every time you think of something for which you should be grateful, you jot it down. You see, I believe that gratitude is a long cut rather than a shortcut on the road to happiness. Gratitude helps you see, although it does not guarantee, that you see the glass as half full. And the half full glass provides you with an opportunity to see what you need to fill that glass all the way. The half empty glass provides you with an opportunity to see how much is left to lose. If you have a challenge with this thought process, think of it this way. As it says in the song, "Pennies from heaven, every cloud must have a silver lining." And if by some chance you're not familiar with the song "Pennies from Heaven," I suggest you look it up and listen to it on the internet. This conversation about gratitude is meant to be more of a reminder than a coaching suggestion. I can tell you to stay positive, and you may think it's a good idea, but will do and think the way you ordinarily do. As a reminder, you now have the opportunity, the choice to view life in an optional way. As my friend and guest on this podcast, Edwin Edebari, says, he suggests you work in segments of 24 hours. He asks you to challenge yourself to remain happy for 24 hours because anyone can do nearly anything for 24 hours. And I promise that bit of wisdom will sound a lot better when you hear it from Edwin a little later in our episode. When you think about it, most great religions have gratitude at their very core. They have their own separate but similar approaches to happiness and gratitude in your life. They ask you to adopt an attitude of gratitude so you'll be happier more of the time. And like anything else, there's a learning curve. So start today. And before we move on, here's a closing thought about gratitude as it relates to sales. I know how challenging the world of sales can be. My process, I hope it makes it easier for you, but you still have to deal with the human factor. And one of the ways to deal with the human factor is to be grateful for what's going on in your life. You're never going to close every sale. You're never going to make every deal be the deal of the century, but be grateful that you have people to talk to. Improve your skills. Be grateful for your learning curve, knowing you're not perfect, but you're heading in the right direction. Just put it all together and remember, gratitude leads to happiness. And that's what today is all about. That's what this episode is all about. How can you do whatever it is you have to do and remain happy and grateful? And now my conversation with the Chief Happiness Officer of the Happy Neighborhood Project, Edwin Edebari. Hello, listeners of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. We have a special guest today, one that I know will make you as happy as he has made me over the last nearly half a year, especially during these trying times of COVID and people just trying to make it through. All of a sudden, there was an ambassador of happiness that appeared in my life and in my community. And I latched on to these rays of sunshine, as dramatic as that might sound. And I came up with the Happy Neighborhood Project. And I'm going to introduce you now to the founder of that, as I said, the world ambassador to happiness, to tell us a little bit about what this project is all about and how happiness fits in our life. So I'd like you all to welcome Edwin Edebari.
Yes.
That's good. Edebari. After asking, I still
No, we are good. We are good.
Language is such a challenge.
It is fun, yes.
So
I am happy to be here. I am very happy to be here. And I want to thank you for what you are doing. And I know that you've done some very fantastic master classes, during this session. So yes, I am Edwin Edebari, and I am the Chief Happiness Officer with the Happy Neighborhood Project. Back in 2009, it was at the height of the recession. Excuse me. Yeah, it really was. That's how the story started. It was at the height of the recession. And I just went out on the street and I started talking to people about happiness. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. It was just to shift people's mind from all the negativity into something positive. And one person became two became three. And then before I know it, we have the I Am Happy Project in 64 cities in 19 countries. And it was phenomenal. I mean, we were able to help individuals to focus during those very trying times during the recession. My work my work was recognized at the United Nations, for what we do for global happiness. And I was invited to do a TEDx talk on happiness. And so I have been really focused on spreading happiness, ever since then. And so it was really interesting when the beginning of 2020, the pandemic came. It was almost like we have been here before, except I joke with people. I say, well, the recession, people got broke. But in the pandemic, not only did you get broke, you were also afraid of dying,
Yeah.
And now we can laugh about it. It wasn't really that funny, then.
Yeah.
And so I decided with my team that, hey, we were able to help individuals during the recession. So why can't we help businesses now during the pandemic? So we focus on doing the same thing, helping the business remove the focus away from pandemic and focus on how to survive their business, how to get their business going. And so we hosted the first event March 20th of 2020. And then we had about 100 people register for that event. Now, fast forward, we host about 67 events every week with over 20,000 registration per month. So
now, this is in the project called the Happy Neighborhood Project. Is that correct? This is
the Happy Neighborhood, yes.
All right, good.
The first one was the I Am Happy Project, and that was focusing on individual, 2009 on. Mm-hmm. But in 2020, it was the Happy Neighborhood Project, focusing on small and medium-sized businesses, yes.
Yes, and before we get into what led you into the world of happiness, I'd like you, as you see it, would you please define happiness as it relates to our conversation?
Well, I really believe that happiness is a state of the mind. Okay, it's a state of the mind, and it's characterized by contentment, joy, pleasure. Okay, when you put those in together, there is a kind of space that we are that only us can really explain it, and that's why I tell people, even though, yes, that's my definition based on interviewing over 1,000 people on the subject of happiness, but I will be the first to tell you that all 7 billion people in the world can define happiness very differently.
Yes.
Because it's a very unique experience. It's a very individual thing. And so if we have that space where anybody can define it their own way, we can still come together and truly still be happy. And when we talk about the area that you work in terms of productivity, it reminds me of what Dalai Lama said, that the purpose of life is to be happy. Okay. And so when you look at it from that point of view, everything we choose to do, whether it's our career, whether it's our business, whether it's raising our family, it comes down to help us to be happy. I have talked to some people, they say, well, you know what, if you look at it that way, it's so selfish and it's so self-centered. And I said, but that's the only way you can look at it, And then somebody will say, well, but I don't care about my own happiness. I just care about the happiness of my family. I say, okay, that's great. But if your family are happy, what does that make you? It make you happy. So it's not a selfish thing. It's not a self-centered thing. It's just that's the way it is.
Happiness is catchy.
It is. You can't give what you don't have, And so if you're not happy, it's going to be very difficult for you to contribute to the happiness of somebody else.
Well, I heard you say, and I know this is really something that means a lot to me, about how important choice is for we as individuals and us as the world community. And it's a challenge sometimes to look at, well, I'm not happy. Well, choose to be happy. And people look at you kind of, how do you do that? How does someone choose to be happy?
Well, I'm very glad that you brought that up, because that is really the crust of my work. Okay, I've dedicated my life the last decade or more on the subject. I've learned a lot. Like I mentioned earlier on, if you interview over 1,000 people on any subject, you start to learn a thing or two about the subject, okay? And so, yes, when I put together the 10 ways to be happy, and the number one in that 10 ways to decide to be happy. You know, so the number one thing is decide to be happy. It's a decision, okay? However, the, after working with so many people, this is something I find out. You and I might be in a mental capacity where we can appreciate happiness as a choice because it is a choice, okay? But here is the danger. If somebody is going through depression, their mental capacity has been reduced to a certain level. Their mood has been reduced to a certain level where they cannot comprehend happiness as a choice. And if you go to that person and you say, hey, shake it out, happiness is a choice, you might as well take a knife and shook it into their chest because that's what you're doing. You are saying to them, why are you choosing to be unhappy? Why are you choosing to be depressed? Why are you choosing to be moody? Whereas that's not what they are choosing to be. So,
Really?
So because of my experience working with so many people, I am very careful, and I actually encourage individuals that yes, once you've got to that mental space and you feel like happiness is a choice, enjoy it. Okay. However, if you're trying to help somebody else, I want you to be a little bit more sensitive because they might not be at that point where they can appreciate it. So help them with baby steps and then bring them gradually to the point where they say, whoa, yes, this is my choice. This is happiness for me. So that's the way I look at that.
Yeah. What you're saying about choice is so important because a lot of us have a tendency to want to fix or make better or help people. And it's in our DNA to help people. And sometimes people, it's not that they're not ready for help. They're not in a place where they either can accept help or help themselves. So what you just said, I find so important is that, yes, it's a choice, but to foist that on someone and say, you can choose happy. You might even cause someone to be less happy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's almost like, hey, look at me. I choose to be happy. Why are you not choosing to be happy?
What's wrong with you?
What's the matter with you? So I always caution people because every time people know that I am the chief happiness officer and they always want to express to me that happiness is a choice, and I agree with them. But if you are not at that point, then please be sensitive to other people because you can do more damage, by trying to force a happiness choice on someone who is not ready. Whereas you can actually help them, help them take some baby steps, remind them of some of the things they've done in the past. And then gradually they can get to that point because, yes, for all of us, it should be a choice.
Well, one of the exercises that I've been sharing now for a long time is the have, do, be exercise, where you get people who say, if I only had more of X, then I could do Y. And then, of course, I'd be rewarded with who I'm being. If only I had more education, then I could get a better job. And then I'd be, someone that people look up to, versus turning that around 180 degrees and ask yourself, who are you being? Are you being someone who is looked up to and respected? Are you doing what someone who is looked up to and respected? And are you having what someone who would do such things would have? And that little shift really applies itself to happiness. And I'd be interested in your feedback.
Absolutely, yes. And the way I put that is that a lot of people put contingency on their happiness. Okay. And it's similar to what you're saying. A person will say, well, you know what? You don't know my situation.
Yeah.
I've been unemployed for whatever length of time. So how can I be happy? Mm-hmm. As if that has anything to do with happiness. Okay. Or you see somebody will say, well, if I get the right job, or if I get the right house, if I get the right significant order, if I just get that promotion, I will be happy. All of those things are contingency on happiness. Because I can tell you this, in the process of interviewing the number of people I did, I came across people who were unemployed and have been unemployed for a long period of time that were happy. Okay, I came across people that their home were foreclosed on them and they were happy. Now, why it is going on, it might be a little bit shaky. Why it was going on is a little bit frustrating. Why it was going on, they go through all kind of emotional stuff. But after it's finished, they find their happiness. That's what I talk about in my TEDx talk. Happiness as a default position. What is your default position? So what most people do is they put a contingency on their happiness. And so until they meet that contingency, they are unhappy. And then they meet the contingency and they find out that it did not make them happy. And so they now just live a life on happiness because they put in contingency. So I tell people, let's do it backwards again,
Good.
Let's do the reverse. Okay, let's do the reverse. Let's say you find your internal happiness and you're really, really, really happy. It dramatically increases the chance of you attracting that significant other that you are looking for. Because they would rather come into a happy space than to come into unhappy space. Okay? If you're really, really happy and you go to look for a job, your chances of getting that job is going to be happier. It's going to be higher because that employer will want a happy person to work for them than unhappy person. Okay? If you're trying to get a house, your chances of getting the house is higher if you are happy, because the realtor want to work with a happy person, the mortgage person want to work with a happy person, the title company want to work.
Everybody's
wants
happy.
to work with a happy person and then if you have some kind of obstacles, they are willing to go over whatever they have to go through to help you make it happen because they just fall in love with you because you are a happy person. That's really so. I tell people, instead of putting a contingency on your happiness and saying, hey, you want this and that to happen before you are happy, find happiness first.
Yeah, it'll be easier to achieve in the right state of mind.
Absolutely.
And it's a challenge when I share that people who are in the world of sales start to think for a moment into the realm of problem solver, but not as just a shift of language, but like, who would you be as a problem solver? How would you approach people? You would no longer approach people with the need to sell. You'd approach people with the mindset of being of service.
Absolutely.
And in order to do that, you need to make this shift. And I find that it's very difficult for people to move past logic for a moment of going, well, of course that would make a difference for me. So I'm wondering, over this period of time, how have you addressed the challenge of people saying, yes, I'm going to do it, but no, change is hard for me.
Yeah. And I say, take baby steps. Okay, I'm very big on baby steps.
Good.
Very big on baby steps. One of the skills that I teach is, because my whole passion is about moving from happiness as an emotion to happiness as a skill. Okay, that's what I am passionate about. Let's move from happiness as an emotion to happiness as a skill. Now, don't get me wrong. Happiness is emotion. We know that it has been for the last 1,000 years and it will continue to be. But let's move away from that. So if we move to happiness as a skill, now there are certain set of skills that we can learn. And now, instead of happiness as an emotion and we are very powerless, we're going through emotional roller coaster, we can now go to happiness as a skill where we are empowered. Now, I know, Ike, you teach a lot of skills when it comes to sales. Now, imagine somebody who don't have the set of skills that you teach before. They're just hoping that, they might sell or they might not sell, and they're just using that hope. And whereas when they learn the skills that you have taught, they increase their closing ratio, they increase their presentation, they increase their fun level because they know those skills. So the same way, I'm telling people, let's look at happiness as a skill. Now, one of the skills that I teach is that will help a situation you just described is what I call the 24-hour promise. Okay. Now, the 24-hour promise simply means that most people can accomplish something in 24 hours, and I joke about it. People who set New Year resolution, on December 31, and they say, okay, the whole next year, I'm going to be this. And then by January 15, they break the resolution already because the brain cannot function like that. So if we do 24-hour promise, we wake up in the morning and promise yourself, I'm going to be happy for 24 hours. That sounds so reasonable, and it sounds so easy.
Reasonable. I love it. It's reasonable.
Yeah, it is. And then, if for some reason you cannot do that, don't beat yourself. Okay, another skill that I teach that kind of work with the 24-hour promise is what I call self-compassion. Okay, people are very good at compassion for other people, which is great. But they are not so good at compassion for themselves, okay? And I say, let's look at self-compassion. If your best friend tried to do something and they didn't do well, would you curse them? Would you beat on them? Would you give them names? Most people will not do that with their best friend. They'll be nice. They'll be kind. They'll be encouraging. So I'm saying you do the same thing to yourself. Instead of you saying, man, I screw up again. I can't even do 24 hours. Everybody can do 24 hours. How come I cannot do 24 hours? What is wrong with me? Instead of all of that, be a little bit nice to yourself. And if you were able to do it for 3 or 4 hours, why don't you give yourself a pat on the back that, hey, I did it for 3 hours. How cool is that? Maybe next time I can do it for 6. Maybe next time I can do it for 12. So when people are saying, yeah, I really want to, but I can't, let them take baby steps. Let them just strive for the portion that they can. And then give themselves a pat on the back. And then get better. So when 24 hours come, now all you got to do is renew your contract for another 24 hours. And if you're not able to do it, have a little compassion for yourself and encourage yourself. And that's what I see here.
Well, the whole idea of compassion in my last episode of the podcast, I talked about a way of approaching a conversation as authentically as possible. And I have come to a couple of challenges with that with clients all over the years because they're not really their authentic self when they go in to communicate during a sale or an environment in which they could be happy with themselves for being authentic during that conversation. And I've been trying to find a window to authenticity, and you just hit on it. The one that I talked about was way off in the left field of communication, but I was reading about platonic love. And platonic love, the first thing you think of comes into the realm of, oh my goodness, where is he going with this? But if you think of somebody with whom you have a platonic relationship, who you care about extremely, what would you do for them? How would you be of service to them? How would you care about them? How happy would that make you? And in addition, how would you take it if they told you, no, thank you, I really appreciate you sharing this with me, but not right now? I believe it would be anything but rejection. Yeah. So looking through that type of window, I think maybe something that would help people make that shift when they might not even be physically prepared, because they can go, oh, yeah. But platonic love is such an out there idea. I hope people glom onto it.
Well, and I think that's exactly the same way when I started to talk about happiness in the beginning, because happiness is so nebulous,
Yeah.
It's not something you can just put your hands on and say, oh, okay, that's happiness. All right, cool. Let's massage it. Let's,
have another $5 worth.
Exactly. But yet, we have to find the skill set that we need to practice. People say practice makes perfect. I don't believe that. I don't agree with that. I feel like practice makes improvement. And if we are committed to improving ourselves, the best way we can do it is practice. If yes. Somebody, once you identify some set of skills, that is very helpful to increasing your happiness, once you understand those set of skills, then it's just a matter of practice. Because you know in the back of your head that you will get better at it, and you will. And that's really the whole focus of the skills. Yeah.
And one of the things, actually, there are two things that I want to acknowledge you about. One is that people seem to go past the practice stage when you suggest that happiness is not a solution, but a way of being that helps you find solutions. And they go, oh, yeah, that's, oh, okay. And the other one is, and I don't know if you've read any of Tony Robbins' books, but in the end of his book, Unlimited Power, he tells a story about Demosthenes and Cicero in the public place, the market, and they're both set to give a speech. And Cicero stands up and gives his speech, and the crowd yells, "Marvelous speech!" And Demosthenes stands up and gives his speech, and they yell, "Let's march."
Wow.
And the distinction between those two is not something that is within the reach of every communicator. And I spot that in you and in other successful leaders who are able to say to a group of people, yeah, it works for me. Does it work? Can it work for you? And have them go, yes. So I wanted to acknowledge you on your ability to get people to march. It's not something that all of us have in equal proportions.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. That. I have one other question before we start to wind down, and that is, here you are a few years back, 2009, that's 13 years ago. Up until that point, what was your relationship with happiness that caused you to do this? Because I can't see you lying in bed as a teenager going, someday I'm going to be the chief happiness officer.
Actually, I didn't even come across that word until I started to talk about happiness, Yeah, so first of all, I was always a happy guy. And that I'm very thankful to my parents and to my grandma especially. And what happened was, like, as the recession was coming in, 2008, becoming 2009, I started to notice people that I have hung out with, and these are people that I would have considered were happy people, you can just start to see their mood going down, and so I was really taken back. Some of them, I go to them, I say, hey, are you okay? Is there something wrong? And of course, some of them have lost their job at that time, and some of them have lost their home at that time.
Crazy time.
It was crazy. And some of them I asked, and I say, have you lost your job? They say, no, but it seemed like it will be very soon. I say, are you anticipating to lose it? He said, well, there's so many people around me losing, so I won't be surprised. So, and I do a lot of meditation. And I'm thinking that because of all of that, just hearing so many people that their mood starts to go down, especially, like I said, these are people that I thought were very happy people. Their mood started going down. So I go into meditation, and then one day I just rise out of meditation. I was feeling really good. I was really happy. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, that was any different. But the next thing, I find myself just going out on the street and start talking to people about happiness. As a matter of fact, I still remember very vividly the first person that I stopped, and I say, can I talk to you about happiness? And they say, yes. And I didn't know what to say.
Well, you got to be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. And the guy said, sure. And I went blank, And then out of nowhere, I've never done this before in my entire life. I go, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you right now? And the guy looked at me like, what? And then I was waiting for an answer. And then eventually he gave me a number, and I'm like, yeah, that's not a bad number. That's pretty cool, And then that was it. From there on, I started asking that simple question, and it has been very exciting.
And it's just grown and grown and grown, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Well, that's what I would like to do now is take a moment for you to tell everyone how they can be in contact with you, with the organization, if they want to get a little extra helping of happiness or would like a second helping of it. What steps can they take right away, like right now, that will help them towards that goal of more happiness? You're on.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, if you're a business owner or a professional, then I invite you to join our Happy Neighborhood Project Tribe. Okay, these are a bunch of like-minded people that just like to collaborate. They like to collaborate with each other. And so if you go to happyneighborhoodproject.com, you will be able to click on the events and you see the networking and you see all the networking that we're doing all over the country and all over the world. Okay, so that's number one. Go to happyneighborhoodproject.com and go to events, go to networking, and then pick anyone that's close to you. We're doing so many of it these days that it's very hard for you not to find one that's convenient for your time, okay? So that's number one. And number two, I would encourage people to go on YouTube. Okay, if they go on YouTube and they can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Good. I just completed in the month of April, every day in the month of April, I did a 1 minute or less video on a different skill that anybody can learn to increase their level of happiness. So if they go to YouTube and just type in my full name, Edwin Edebari, the YouTube channel will come up. They can watch as many videos as they want or just subscribe so they can see what's coming up next.
Excellent.
So I just want to kind of leave them at those two. And then, and if they have not watched my TEDx talk, they will also see it on that YouTube channel to watch my TEDx talk. Yeah.
And if they wanted to find out for immediate involvement in the Happy Neighborhood Project, where would they go to find out about that?
Yes. And so they go to Happy Neighborhood Project and they can click on membership.
Aha.
Yes. If they click on membership, then there's a small form they will fill out and one of my team will get back to them on that.
And for those who choose the come and network option, how much upfront cost is there for them?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that because back in 2020 when we started, we're supposed to celebrate International Day of Happiness. And we had 100 people register for that event. And towards the end, people were having so much fun. And they were like, we got to do this again. And I said, wait a second, it's supposed to be an annual event. They said, no, we got to do this again. And so we decided to do it the following week. And then I still remember somebody asking me, hey, is this always going to be free? And I opened my big mouth and I said, yes. and I had no clue what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how fast it was going to grow or grow as big as it is. But I am so thankful that for the online networking experience, we have been able to keep it free for more than a year, and we plan to keep it free forever.
And how many people would you say have gone through events in this past year? I know it's an astounding amount for a brand new company,
over 20,
brand new project.
Yes, over 20,000 people.
And so I can tell you from firsthand experience that if you want to meet and collaborate with other like-minded business owners from, well, around the world, and if you say, well, my business isn't around the world, you'll meet somebody who can help you put your business around the world through this project. There are people just like you, just like me, just like Edwin, who are into contribution. And you find people in networking events a lot of times who are there to find people to sell to, but I find very, very few of those people, and they don't stay around very long because they can't take all the happiness. It's just too happy here. I want to sell stuff.
I love it.
That's so funny.
That's a good way to put it. A good way to put it. Yeah. And also, too, the people whose business are very local, they can also just pick a local event that is close to them and just attend those events, and they'll meet people who are local. To them, yes.
I started with the Southern California group, and I've been to Ireland and England and India, and talking with people who are going through the same identical stuff that you and I and everybody else are going through when it comes to business. The borders mean nothing when it comes to operating a good and successful business, one that's built on the right ideas and the right emotions. And I'm always looking for organizations and for people that I can share with you, our listener, that will have an opportunity to help you along the way. I have a sales system, which I think makes it an easier and happier way to sell. And here's a man who's giving you a happier way to live your life if you choose to do that. And what I'm delighted is that Edwin decided and chose to be on this podcast.
Yes.
So on behalf of all of our listeners, I want to say thank you. And if there's anything in closing you would like to say, we'd be delighted to hear from it. But I just want to tell you thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to say I am so happy to be on your podcast.
Good.
And then I want to say thank you for all the wonderful things that you are doing. And folks, if you are the opportunity to take advantage of Ike's class, I'm telling you, do it. Okay, because I think all of us are salespeople in one way or the other. It's just that some very few are good at it, and most people are bad at it. if you want to go from the
they're not perfect yet.
Exactly. If you want to go from the not so good to the good side, you definitely want to be exposed to Ike class. I'm telling you that.
Thank you.
Now, on the happy note, I believe with every cell in me, I believe with every cell in me that every single human being deserves to be happy. And that includes you in the audience. You are hearing this right now and you say, okay, that sounds really good, but I don't think they are talking about me because my situation is so bad that there's no way nothing can help me. That's absolutely not true. There are organizations out there that are ready to help you. You just have to go out and ask. Okay, it doesn't matter how bad your situation is. There are people who are ready to help you. And one of the things that I tell people, Ike, is when you get a situation where you think yourself is so bad and you're saying, why me? All you have to do is Google it. Google what you are going through. Just Google it. And you'll find out that there are thousands, if not millions of people going through similar situations. Now, it doesn't change the pain that you have so much, but guess what? It helps to put it in proper perspective. It helps to show that you have not been singled out. It helps to show that you have not been targeted. It helps to show that you are just living this life. So when you know that you are human, exactly, and so you can seek help. So seek help because there is help out there for you. And if you can find help that easy, please reach out to me. I don't have all the answers, but I definitely can connect you with people who are working very hard to help people. So you deserve to be happy, and make sure you know that.
Thank you so much. I really, again, want to thank you. And I know that we'll have opportunities to speak again in the future. But for right now, take care.
Thank you. Stay happy.
You too.
Bye-bye.
And that brings us to the end of episode 58 of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. I really urge you to go over the exercise I suggested about figuring out what problem you solve so that you could use it as part of your language. It really will make a big difference in your business. Also, be sure to go to closethedealwithoutselling.com and join the club. Become a part of the Close the Deal Club and learn the easier way to sell an easier way. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.